Canada's immigration bubble may have popped, it may have peaked, it may be finished as we get into the data and what is actually happening right now when it comes to immigration. So let's get right into this. Immigration, incredibly controversial right now, but polls find more than half of Canadians want fewer immigrants than Ottawa's target. So let's get into this. This is really interesting. The poll also found that 55% of Canadians want Canada to accept fewer international students than the 900,000 expected by the government this year. A Nanos poll for the Globe and Mail found a rise of almost 20 percentage points in the past 6 months in the number of Canadians who think this country should accept fewer immigrants than Ottawa's 2023 target of 465,000. So it's very interesting, isn't it? You're seeing this shift now. Canadians are starting to think we don't want those immigrants anymore, because look at all the problems we have right now with healthcare, social services, housing, affordable housing in particular. They don't want more and more immigrants. It's not surprising that they're being led to think that. You know, immigrants are kind of needed for Canada's growth into the future. A lot of people don't understand or realize that, but we need immigrants, but we need more skilled immigrants. And the problem is Canada fails to attract skilled immigrants as they go to the United States, which is down below us, because it's a warmer climate, less taxes, more affordable housing. So they all go there and they can earn more money. It's got the highest GDP per capita in the world in the United States. So Canada is finding it incredibly hard to actually attract new talent, and it's just turning into this more and more unskilled immigration, which really just pulls down wages at the low end, makes it incredibly competitive, as we're going to get onto right now. And this kind of proves the point, which is if Canadian unemployment is so low, why all the long job lines? So this is happening, and this is happening for low skilled jobs. So let's get into this. Canada's labor market is just off record lows, but a quick drive and it may not seem that way. Statistics Canada StatCan reported the unemployment rate was 5.5% in August, just off the record low. Yet viral videos are popping up with lines of hundreds of people looking for entry-level jobs. More and more people are asking why the data doesn't match the anecdotes, and here's why. So basically, it's very interesting. Obviously, we saw this that happened in Brampton. We saw that, the massive unemployment lines there. And you've got this happening as well. Over 700 people attended a job fair at Crown Plaza Hotel in downtown Kitchener Tuesday afternoon. The majority of them international students. So, you know, this is just kind of crazy. You know, we're always led to believe that all the immigration, all the people coming by the mainstream media and the government are these skilled workers that we all need. But the reality is a lot of it is unskilled labor that we don't need. Where do all the immigrants work? They're working the low-end, low-skilled jobs. They're keeping wages compressed at the low end, keeping more people poor, essentially. A lot of the monopolies that you see out there, like Bell and Rogers and TELUS, they employ hundreds and hundreds of thousands of immigrants, and they lobby for higher and higher immigration because they are companies that directly benefit from that higher immigration. And you've got an oligarchy in Canada. You've got an oligarchy of airlines, grocery store chains, telecommunications providers, and you can probably name a bunch more than I've just named there. And all these companies, when you look at the jobs and who's doing the jobs, a lot of them are immigrants, and a lot of them are paying miserable wages out to these immigrants. So, you know, it's not the high skilled jobs that we're led to believe, and we've still got labor shortages everywhere. So this proves the point. I'm a guy that knows the immigration system because I went through it as a skilled worker, and it pisses me off. And even the employer that I was working for when I moved to Canada just could not believe it and was going crazy about the amount of refugees that were coming into the country. They don't have to do pretty much anything, and then we need you as a skilled worker, and guess what? We can't get you because all the bureaucracy, all the hoops that you have to jump through to get things like labor market impact assessment. It's just absolutely crazy in Canada how hard it actually is to get a skilled immigrant. But if you want to get a refugee, that's very, very easy. And that's just the reality of the way the immigration system works, unfortunately. It favors the low skilled instead of actually the high unskilled. Points that are given for people just being in Canada, just being present in Canada and working, doing any job, doesn't matter what it is. Those points add up to a lot in the points-based system that Canada has. And when you compare that to things like getting a labor market impact assessment, which is very costly, you have to do it through a lawyer. There's many hoops that you have to jump through to get that. The points difference isn't that much different. And you're talking about somebody, an employer who actually needs that person. So they've gone out and got that labor market impact assessment, compared with somebody who's just been in Canada working at Wendy's for a year. It is absurd, guys. The immigration system. Yeah, I try not to talk about it because people will just call you racist, and really that just undermines the meaning of racism. So anyway, it's kind of crazy what is happening, but yeah, this is happening across Canada. So low-income international students are being used to patch Canada's low-wage labor gap, and yeah, I just talked about that. We went through these seasonal adjustments the other week. Incredibly interesting. And I want to show you something as well, because this is interesting. So these charts, and I'll put a link in the description, show you immigrant population and how it's rose in Canada. But you can see here, there has been a massive shift in where the immigrants have been coming from since 1971. If you look going back to 1871, most of the immigrants were from Europe, and this continued all the way until between 2016 and 2021, when you saw that flip to Asia and Africa now representing a higher percentage of immigrants than Europeans. Now, I'm not going to get into the nuance of that, but what I want to tell you is, obviously, you probably have realized this already, a lot of the people are coming from developing countries. I mean, that is just probabilities. I have to tread very lightly when talking about this, because a lot of people are just going to call me racist, which is totally wrong, because we're talking about the economic impacts of this immigration. And I'm here telling you, hey, you know, if more than 60% of immigrants are coming from Africa and Asia, chances are they're not coming with buckets of money. Chances are they're coming from developing countries. What they're competing for and where they're actually putting pressure on services becomes evident, obviously. So it's interesting to look at that makeup, and I'll leave a link in the description so you can explore that too. So they talked about unemployment. It's up 10%. Obviously, it's at 5.5% from 5%. But when you think about all the immigration and when you think about these lines, well, there is a lot more nuance to that than just the 5.5% unemployment. They're not even tracking a lot of these workers. So we could have unemployment right now well above 10%, which is likely considering the amount of immigrants that they're bringing in, putting massive pressure on public services, as we know. And it is just causing people to say, hey, enough's enough. I can see the result of your mad immigration campaign, and it is not good. But the problem is, will they change public opinion too much towards anti-immigration? Because that is very likely to happen right now. And that wouldn't be a good thing for Canada long term, because Canada does need immigrants, but it needs to be attracting those highly skilled immigrants. Problem is, it's going to struggle to do that when you've got the biggest housing bubble in the world, and you can just go to the United States, you can earn more money, have a better lifestyle, as I said before. And the government has come out and they are saying that they're going to reevaluate immigration targets. Obviously, guys, this is no coincidence that they've come out and said this. It's because they are looking at all the polling data, which is suggesting, number one, they're not going to be the next government, and number two, that people are starting to say enough is enough when it comes to this immigration policy that you're pushing. We can see the result of it on the streets everywhere. There are immigrants living in tents. You know, we have major problems with public services right now. Shelter systems are overwhelmed. You've got food banks that are overwhelmed. It's just a crazy situation that you have going on in Canada right now, and the public is kind of waking up to that. But this may have a negative effect long term. But what I want to put to you is, does that mean that immigration is peaking? And I don't mean this month right now. I mean 2023 and 2024. Will we look back on these 2 years and say that was the peak of Canadian immigration? That was the peak of the immigration bubble. And I also want to show you this because it's very, very interesting. Canada's immigration boom may be ending. Permanent residence applications plummet. Canada recently experienced a sharp and sudden drop in permanent resident applications. The monthly volume of applications fell 15% to 17.8K in July, representing a 28% decline from last year. Think about that. Considering the amount of immigrants we've had this year, we've had more than last year, you would expect that to be increasing, but it's declining. So obviously there's something going on there, and they point to it right here. Monthly data is only readily available going back to 2020, but it was the worst July over that period and was also the second month to show annual growth contract and less than half of the size of May 2023's peak. Not enough to be a trend, but there's enough data to prevent dismissing it as an isolated issue. So it's very, very interesting, isn't it, that that is going on. And then it also says this: population growth remains high, but is anybody staying? Certainly not the skilled immigrants. I get so many emails from people who are leaving Canada, people that the country needs to keep in Canada, but it's failing to keep them. They're going to other countries, predominantly the United States, because they can earn more money, they can have a better lifestyle, and they've realized this, and this is only going to continue and compound over the coming years, and Canadians just aren't seeing this one coming. Everything is coming to head at once. The housing bubble, the auto bubble, the immigration bubble, the commercial real estate bubble, the private debt bubble held by commercial enterprises in Canada. It is just insane. Canada's population isn't contracting, but people may be getting skeptical of its offerings. A large number of temporary residents are arriving, though. Visas like study permits, in fact, study permits have been so popular that nearly 1 in 48 people in the country are currently on one of those visas. However, the data reveals students aren't too keen on staying, and considering everything that's going on right now, do you really blame them? A lot of this likely has to do with Canada's approach to population growth. Most places with high population growth need the growth to cope with a booming economy. People are attracted because they want to be part of that growth and opportunity. That isn't in Canada. Despite a population boom, per capita GDP is contracting. That shouldn't surprise, since the OECD forecast Canada dead last in that area. And you've just got to think about that, because per capita GDP isn't even accurate either, because when you're talking about GDP, you're deflating it with that CPI number. So you know that the economy is doing way worse than that. Per capita GDP is falling off a cliff. So a lot of these people who are coming, they're going to be phoning people back home, and they're going to be saying, you know what, don't come, because it's not the booming economy that we were led to believe it was and was advertised to us. And there's a lot of immigration consultants in places like India and China that are completely unregulated, that advertise this false idea of what you're going to get when you move to Canada, and then people pay for their services. They get to Canada, realize a lot of it was a lie, and this keeps happening, and it keeps fooling people. And it's been a good show for them to go with, because they can just point to, you know, Hollywood and say, you want to move to America, have that American dream that you've dreamed of, go to Canada. It's exactly the same thing. And then they get here and realize they can't even get a low skilled job, or they're stuck in lines like this, guys. I mean, it is just crazy. This is sort of Great Depression stuff that we are talking about, and it's happening here in Canada. So it's kind of crazy what's going on, guys, when it comes to immigration. Has this bubble peaked as well? So anyway, if you've enjoyed this video, you might like this playlist here. You might like this video here. If you're looking for a VPN, go to expressvpn.com/marketmania. That's my VPN. I want to thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Take